I will start by welcoming everyone here to this July meeting of the Saginaw City Planning Commission. If you are here to present a case, please come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and make your presentation. We may ask you questions for clarity or for more information. A simple majority vote of the members present will decide your request. If you're here to speak in the public comment phase of the meeting, please also come to the podium, give us your name and address for the record, and direct your comments to the commission. We have no time limit, but brevity is appreciated. Let's begin with the roll call.
Clint Bryant.
Present.
Fred Zawerko, excused. Jim Doan.
Here.
Bob Hanley.
Present.
Yolanda Jones.
Here.
Floyd Clock.
Here.
Jack Nash, excused. Jim Nightingale.
Present.
Thomas Braley, excused. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Very good. First item on our agenda is approval of the meeting from April 23rd. We have the minutes.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Support. Moved and supported. Are there any discussions, additions, comments? Further, if not, entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
All right. Just needed a vote.
Or, I'm sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We have the agenda. Do we have any changes or additions to the agenda?
I have none.
If not, do we have to vote on that, or do we? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
There's no motion. You
I'll
don't
make the
really,
motion.
no, you don't really need a motion.
No.
If there's nothing to add, it stays the
Nothing
same.
to add. Our first item of business is case J190014, the academic tutorial and academic counseling at 2715 State Street. We will hear from you now.
My name is Bill Skilling. My address is 153 Hallmark, Dahlonega, Georgia. And so I'm here tonight to answer any questions you have about what we're planning to do at 2715 State Street. But I'll just kind of give you a quick overview and then I'll open it up to you. I am president of Reimagine Education, LLC. And so our company manages education. And we provide through a school, charter school, virtual education to students across the state, up in the UP, all over the state. And we open up tutorial centers, Reimagine Education does, tutorial centers for academic tutorial for ages 5 through 22, and then for those who are special needs up to 20 through 26, age of 26. And so our focus is working with at-risk students and helping students to complete their education, as well as to get their GED if needed, or high school diploma. And we also do vocational education, counseling. We help students transition from school to work, school to community college, school to four-year universities. So anything, or military as well. So the facility will be used for individual one-on-one tutoring and academic and vocational and post-high school career planning. So that's a summary of what we do. So I'll take any questions at this time.
How many students do you expect on a daily basis, or let's go weekly? On a weekly basis, how many students do you anticipate to actually be in the area? Because one thing that I looked at earlier this afternoon is that you guys are pretty close to a bar. It's a few hundred feet away from a bar. So I know there's nothing in there, but I mean, I'm just curious as how many students you guys would expect to have on a weekly basis at the facility.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's really hard to, I don't want to give you a concrete number, but I'll tell you how many students we currently service in this area without the center. We have approximately 40 students. And so the way our system is set up is, and this helps get to the answer, so I'm going to take a little bit of a longer pathway to get to your answer. We have a teacher for each subject, a teacher for elementary, but we also have a mentor assigned to every student. And so most of the tutoring that happens virtually. And so our teacher mentors have computers with 2 monitors, and so they're always up live online. So you can pop in at any time you want and get help, and they can take control of your computer, your lesson. And so in that sense, most of the one-on-one tutoring doesn't happen in a physical location. But why do we have physical locations? Because wherever we have a high concentration of students, and you have a high concentration of potentially at-risk students, we like to get that personal one-on-one as much as possible. So where does the role of the mentor come in? I mentioned the teacher. The mentor is someone who is responsible for the success of that student's education. And so that person is the one that really develops a personal relationship with not only the student, but the parent or parents and guardian of that student. And so they try to know that student intimately. They're in contact a minimum of twice a week required, okay? As well as the teacher for the subject area. So why I'm explaining this to you is so that you understand that most of the tutoring happens virtually, not physically present. Now, to get to your question specifically, our busiest tutorial center, where we have the most traffic, is in Oak Park. And currently, on a given day, throughout the day, and a day is an 8-hour period of time, we may have 15 students come in throughout an 8-hour period day.
From 5 to 22.
Yes, but we separate. So the kids aren't, students, some are young adults, aren't all together. So what that means is most of our students, when we select locations for our centers, we select locations where there's a bus route, because our students don't have cars, generally speaking. It's rare that a student would come in their own car and drive themselves. They're either using the bus, they're walking, or a parent or a guardian drops them off. That's how our students get to the Learning Center. The other thing too is we actually, for students that don't have transportation, either because the parent can't take them or they don't have the money to come, we provide free bus passes. So and that's the role of the mentor. So if we have a student named Bill Skilling, for example, that we know needs to come to the center to get help, it would be helpful for them to have that one-on-one, and they don't have a means to get there, they don't have the money to get there, that mentor is responsible for making sure that that child or that young adult can get there. And so we buy bus passes as well.
Did that factor into anything to do with the location that you guys looked at?
Absolutely.
Okay, 350 feet away from the bar.
You know, to be honest with you, I was looking at the immediate area. I couldn't even tell you where that bar is that you're even referencing. So my apologies. I was looking at what was going on there now in terms of what services are being provided, and saw that as a location that would be good for us to have because of the main roads there, the intersection. So that's how I was looking at it.
I do have some questions.
Yes.
What are your expectations for growth in this area for your school?
In Saginaw,
For this facility and how they would interact with students, what are your expectations for growth?
well, we don't have a set number because we never know for sure. So I can't say we're coming here because we think we're going to have 100 or 200 students that need servicing. But anytime we've had a center, we do grow, okay? Because it's of the convenience and we have a physical location for students who need servicing. So generally, we don't open a center unless we have about 40 students to begin with already in that area, which we do here in Saginaw. We're a little over 40 students. And I would anticipate that probably over the course of 2 or 3 or maybe 4 years, we could grow to be 60, 70, possibly even 80 students that we service. But again, most of our students don't come to the physical location. The students that we particularly target to come are those in most need of that one-on-one help to be successful.
How many are you setting up right now in the building for being able to all at one time?
At one time,
At one-
8,
8?
8.
Are there plans to grow that potentially?
No, because we're a tutorial. We're not like a classroom. We don't do classroom instruction. It's really one-on-one. So why would we have 8? For example, we plan to have 2 full-time teacher mentors there, and then we have an administrator that works out of an office there. But some of the students will come in and work on their own. They'll get that one-on-one help, and they'll just stay and work, at their station. So it's not like it's always that one-on-one going on. So you could have 2 teachers, 8 students potentially there. But obviously, it's all one-on-one, so they're not all being serviced by the teacher, mentor at the same time.
All right. One of the issues that came up when I looked at everything, and we had a brief discussion
Right.
earlier, was about parking.
Correct.
Did anyone else know the parking issue that I raised to Cassie?
No, go ahead.
It has, the requirement, and as stated right in the document, is for 11 parking spots, but it only has 2. It only has the 2 immediately behind the building. Here's the building.
Okay.
This is mine.
Okay.
And it also doesn't have its own driveway access. And you are looking into dealing with those problems, is that correct?
Yeah, see, until it was brought to my attention a few days ago, when we purchased this from the Saginaw Community, or County Community Mental Health Authority, Sandra, the CEO, told us that we had an easement and use of the parking there. And so if you look at our drawing, you'll see where it says shared parking, because that was the premise by which it was sold to us by, so that we weren't concerned about it. But since that time, and talking with Ms. Miller and yourself today, just recently, we realized that now we have to have some sort of legal agreement in writing. And so what we've done today, for example, I met with Jim Nesbitt, whose organization is leasing facilities and working there, and to see what the parking was like. And he said there's always plenty of parking, that's not an issue. But we have to get a legal agreement or a letter, I guess it would be considered legal. This is out of my territory, okay, so I'm just a layperson when it comes to the legal part of it. But we met with Sandra's assistant today, Ryan Mulder, because she was not in, and explained to him what our need was today. And I said we need to have 11 parking spaces total because of the square footage we have. And so I understand it goes by square footage. And you can see that in the drawing that was actually put in by the architect as well, recognizing that, but we never saw it as a problem because they said we could use the shared parking. And so now we're moving forward to get that document. And I have a clearer understanding now, even more so just talking with you, is exactly what we need to have in that document.
So the board members will understand. I mean, I have some knowledge of this because it's next to my building.
Yeah.
This originally was the Bellinger Square, some of you may remember that. Then it became, Russ Ackerman purchased the whole property as a rental property. And he sold it to the Saginaw County Community Mental Health, which owned all the properties around my building as one property. So there was always shared parking because it was all owned by the same entity. Even the renters that were in the building that you've now purchased, they had access because they were renters of this facility. When I saw this, it occurred to me that this building was going to have a problem because it's now a separated owner. With a separated ownership, there is no right automatically to shared parking without a license or an easement, one or the other. And so that was where the issue arose, because it isn't just this owner. If in fact this, you sell it in 5 or 10 or 15 years, if there is no right of use that passes with the title to your land, the next user would have only 2 spots.
Right.
So,
For both of you then, is the expectation that this can be solved?
well, I'm assuming it can be based upon what we're being told. I don't see any reason it couldn't be, assuming the health department concurs. But they would have to give a written license or an easement
So,
for use of the land. And the other issue is really the only drive that the health department owns is the one off of Genesee. The one between the 2 buildings, his and mine, is actually my property. I'm not, I'm not gonna make an issue of it, but I'm not, at the same time, I'm not giving a license either. But people use it all the time. But really, you need to have a legal access. And
Right.
that would be off of Genesee.
See, when we purchased it from them, they told us we had an easement. Okay, now what we have to verify, because I wasn't prepared for that part of it after, when I was talking to you just a few minutes ago. We're gonna go back and check to see if it's already written into the deed. We don't recall. But we're gonna work with Sandra. We've already, like I said, I mentioned we met with Ryan Mulder today. Of course, he doesn't have any authority to do, say yes or no to anything, but he made that clear. But Ryan didn't see where this would be an issue, that he felt that probably could be resolved, but it's not up to him to decide. And so we're going to be pursuing this. We'll check our current deed, and we'll be in touch again tomorrow with their office.
I do think the county community mental health is who will have to actually deed or give you.
Right, they're the ones that sold it to us, correct, yes, and they own the parking, so that's who we're working with.
And they have a board.
Yes, they have, it'll be the county community health board, yeah. So the CEO or the administrator
Right.
will have to take it to them with a recommendation.
Right.
And hopefully it won't be a problem, but there's no way to predict at this point.
Well, we couldn't even access our property without an easement,
Right.
because there's no other way for us to get there.
Now, they should have been clear on that when they sold you the property, but obviously they weren't, so,
Buyer beware.
yeah, it has to be cleared up.
Yeah.
From our perspective as a planning board, it has to be cleared up.
Based on how cooperative she was, anything we need or help, like, she told us we had it already, verbalized it, so I don't anticipate, but we don't know until we sit down with her and go through it, to be honest with you, but given the conversation and through the buy-sell agreement, we felt that she was always being very cooperative and willing to help in any way for us to get up and going. And she did say we had an easement, because that was one of the questions we had.
I do recommend you check not only your deed, but their deed for their property and see if there is some kind of an easement for all the different units,
Yes,
including this one. So it might be there on their deed.
right, okay.
And I'll continue to work with Bill and make sure that this is communicated both ways.
I had one question regarding the students. Am I right in thinking that given the population of your students, they are your students for all different lengths of time, depending on what their needs are? You might have somebody for a short time or a year or more?
That's right.
How does that?
Yeah, we take students at any time. So unlike, traditional public school or charter school, where they have a set period of time to take students, we work with students that come to us in July. This month, we've had several come to us, start with us. And so students enter and exit at various times. And this is a highly mobile population of kids, but we have a very high retention rate because of how we service students. We have a 1-to-40 ratio, and in addition to the mentor. So the mentor is in addition to the 1-to-40 ratio. And it's because of that personal relationship we develop with the students is why they stay, and they have a much higher success rate. It's all about that human connection. It's about establishing that rapport and that confidence with the parent, guardian, and student that we're there to serve their best interest. And so that's why we tend to retain more than a typical school like ours would.
Do students come to you as a result of someone recommended them to you? Or how do they find you?
I probably right now, because we track how they find us, I would say that the second best way we get students is other students and parents recommending us. We service a lot of students that have not done well in a traditional environment for various reasons, or they've been expelled or something like that has happened to them. We also service students who are actually very, very bright and have a special talent. For instance, we had a student this year who was an organist, traveled all over the country. That requires a lot of coaching and teaching, and now this person got a full ride. So you get all ends of the spectrum and in between as well. But we also do market our school and let people know about us, that we're available. But I'd say right now, number 2 is our reputation and how we service students. because it's unsurpassed. You will not find a school that does more than we do. We invest a lot in that human touch. Even if when you had children or yourself when you were in school, if I were to ask you the question, who was your favorite teacher? And then ask you why, I'll let you just think about that for about 10, 15 seconds, okay? And then I'm going to answer your question. You're going to say something about that person cared about me, was invested in me, thought, and had something, there was that special connection. It isn't very often that you hear, well, because they could teach the quadratic formula so effectively. It was the relationship piece.
Sure.
And that's what we're trying to do. We establish relationships. We also establish relationships with businesses, because I mentioned about the vocational education piece. Well, in my day, we called it co-op. Today, it's more like school to work. In other words, the education is more connected to what they do. Before, if I was in high school, I could go work at McDonald's in a co-op, and if I'm learning responsibility, I'm meeting the objective. That's co-op. But in school to work, you're actually learning a skill or something in pursuit of where they want to go with their life after school. So we do a lot of that. That's why we need those connections.
So how would that be different? Sorry to interrupt you. How would that be different from like CTE? Is that the same thing you're talking about?
Yes, we offer CTE. That's part of our
Okay,
program.
okay.
Exactly. It's exactly what it is.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Any further questions?
Do you provide any kind of test preparation services in this tutorial? SAT preparation, ACT?
Yes, we do. We do both. And the other thing that we do is starting in 5th grade, with the assessments that we use, we can give a parent a predictable score on the SAT and ACT starting in 5th grade. We can say, based on the trajectory of where the student is today and their comprehension in the numeracy literacy, language literacy, this is where they're going to score as of today. Now, the further out you are, the less accurate. I want to be clear about that. But it still gives them an indication, a trajectory where they need to be. So what we do is we update parents each year and the student where they are in closing that gap in terms of where we want them to be. So what is the gap I'm looking at? I'm looking at the college readiness scores. Okay, so how far off are they in the zone at this point? They stay on the same trajectory. And so then we can start doing interventions at a younger age because of how we assess. So every student that comes in is assessed as to where they are in literacy, both in math and language. So once we know where they are, then we know how to place them, and we can also modify our curriculum. We have what we call intelligent branching embedded in our curriculum that aligns with the different state assessments, as well as ACT and SAT. And so, for example, I'll give you a simple analogy or example of this. Say you have a 3rd grade student, and let's say there's 20 problems they do in division. And they both got 10 problems wrong. And oh, by the way, they got the same 10 problems wrong. Can we assume that it's the same reason? And the answer is no, we cannot assume that the problem is the same, even though they got the same 10 problems wrong. In a traditional environment, if you did a paper test like that, a teacher may not be able to pick up why these two students got the same 10 problems wrong. But with intelligent branching, it will diagnose all this is going on with the software as to why Bill got 10 wrong or why Johnny got 10 wrong. Bill's problem was addition. Johnny's problem was subtraction. So even though they got the same 10 problems wrong, it was for 2 different reasons. So the intelligent branching puts them into remediation automatically. How much is involvement as a teacher at this point? Not at all. It's all being done through the intelligent branching of the software. And then once there's enough repetitiveness of correct answers, it then puts them back into the 20 additional division problems. There could be a 3rd student at the same time who got all 20 right, who was put into more advanced curriculum. So that's the advantage of what we do with our program. So we can take, whether they're remedial or advanced, we can address both. We also offer AP classes. All the AP classes out there, we offer them all.
So if I, as a parent, I had a student in an advanced placement class, and I was concerned that that student was not being adequately prepared to take the exam, I could send my student to you.
Yes. And not only that, see, with our software, we can identify and project how well they're going to do before they even take the test. So we can put them into remediation where they need it. And that's the advantage of this. I've been involved in this type of education since 1993. So it's something I'm very passionate about. And I'm not saying that this is right for all kids. That should be full-time. Sometimes it's just part-time. It's a blend. But I think it can be very effective for students that need an alternative way.
What do you do about meeting the economic, financial needs of parents who want to send a student to you?
It's free. Doesn't cost the parent anything. So we also provide all the technology. We provide free Wi-Fi. And like I said earlier, for kids who can't afford to come and get the one-on-one help, the mentor is supposed to be able to identify those students. That's his or her responsibility to make sure they get to the learning center. And so this is why we buy bus passes. We also buy gas cards. So some parents may have a car, but they can't afford the gas. So we keep, our mentors keep gas cards and as well as bus passes so that those kids can get there. We take away all the economic barriers for them to come.
Mr. Mayor, you have?
Yeah, I had a few. I just to follow up that. How are you financed if it's all free?
The state funds it.
All right, so is this funding through the regular curriculum funding for the students in the traditional schools the same as that, or is it a different form,
It's still a foundation grant, okay? It's still a foundation grant, so yes, to answer it succinctly, the answer is yes.
All right, so, and that was where I was gonna go anyway, and that, do you give diplomas, does your school give diplomas, or is that left to the traditional schools?
No, we give the diplomas.
All right.
We're fully accredited by Advanced Ed, and we're also NCAA accredited.
Okay.
The reason we're NCAA accredited is because we have another program within our program, and these are like really advanced hockey players. And so they're from all over the country. And so they travel all the time. This is the only way they can get their education. And so our courses have to be NCAA accredited so that when they go to college, they have no problem getting accepted.
So you take everything from dropouts to regular students out of traditional schools. It just depends on where they are in their education then.
It's whatever their need is. Yes, and again, we also service special needs students. And so we're actually going to be working with a REMC to help educate EI students this fall.
Does your program extend beyond the normal 12th grade 17, 18-year-old, or
Yes, it does.
How far?
So we go up through, for the non-special needs student, non-learning disabled student, let me clarify and say it that way. We go up through age 22. For the learning disabled student, we go up through 26.
All right.
Any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion, and we may want to consider a contingency here based on the parking issue.
I would make the motion to make, since I raised it. Frankly, I'm not sure it fits the examples of what a personal service is, but I think it does satisfy the personal service. So, having said that, I'll move to approve, subject to being able to obtain a legal authority to use to use 9 parking places minimum of the Saginaw County Community Mental Health, either through a license or an easement, in writing that goes with the land, and to having a easement for ingress and egress off of Genesee Avenue.
Well said.
All right, did you get that, Cassie?
Yeah,
Okay.
Is there support?
support.
Been moved and supported. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
You opposed to that?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
opposed.
All right. And so you need a roll call? Probably. We should have a roll call.
I've got it. What, do I say all of your names?
You
and
just,
then
yep,
you
just
say
go right down the line.
Yolanda,
Yes.
Clint,
No.
Floyd,
Yes.
Jim,
Yes?
Bob,
No.
Jim.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, once you've verified your authority to use the parking and have ingress and egress, then they can issue the appropriate.
Very good. The next item on our agenda is other development updates.
Okay, so, a few of our past applicants had to go before, engineering to get approved, and a few of them have come through. House Beck Pickle just got approved on July 3rd. That one came before the Planning Commission in April. They had to separate the buildings, if you remember, the phases were right next to each other because they weren't able to retain enough stormwater. So they had to have a channel to be able to drain the stormwater, but that was finally approved on July 3rd. Also on July 3rd, the engineering approved solutions for automation, that expansion over on the southwest side, on Hamilton Street, in between Hamilton and Michigan. They were doing a decently large expansion, for their size of building. It was between 5,000 to 6,000 square feet. They said, the final plan was about 5,000. And their main issue when they came before us was that they wanted to leave the parking lot gravel, and that is not allowed for the zoning ordinance. So then there's been a lot of conversations that came before us in November, and they had to keep revisiting their site plans to change it. And then the city actually agreed to put in, Hamilton Street didn't have a sewer line on that road, so they actually put in a sewer line for them and reached out extensions to connect to their driveway, so that they just had to pull them out. So that one was approved on July 3rd as well. And then this Thursday, we have a couple different things going for the Historic District Commission. Thought you might be interested. We have a house in the Heritage Square neighborhood that is going to be installing solar panels. And then also a couple homes have come forward that they're just updating painting on their house.
Updating what?
Painting.
Oh, okay.
Painting their porches and doors. And then one actually, there's been a lot of, in the Heritage Square neighborhood, there's been a lot of a push for them to come before the Historic District Commission, because technically they are supposed to, and a lot of them haven't. One of them is also an application to repair their porch, replace some of the rotting wood that was on their porch. So, lastly, I forgot, you haven't heard, we haven't met in a couple months, so this one, the Saginaw County Community Mental Health is actually doing a parking lot on Fayette. That is right behind, they have a couple parking lots, near that area by their building. And they are paving a very small lot over there, just a section that they bought. And that didn't need to come before the Planning Commission because of the side, it just was going to engineering.
Okay, next item is master plan update and discussion.
We have, Yolanda is on this committee. We formed a committee to start talking about, updating the master plan. I handed out the master plan to you. Floyd, were you at the meeting when we handed out master plan? Okay, I'm sorry. I should have brought one. I didn't think about it, that you weren't there.
I don't believe I do.
Okay, I have quite a few extra copies, so I'll have to drop one off to your office. I could do that tomorrow. And, so we had a conversation a little bit over, a few people sent me comments.
Before you go any further, you formed a committee. Who's the committee?
Yes, myself, Yolanda, John Stemple, Tom Miller Jr., and then we also pulled in Eric Scorsoni. He is, I'm not sure what his title is.
He's a professor at Michigan State University Extension.
He was at the strategic plan.
Yes.
We've had
Yes.
him here before, I think.
Yes.
He was at the
Yes.
strategic plan.
He presented on, the economic development strategy for the city. He's an economist, He's from the area, but he now lives in East Lansing or Lansing.
Right, and he's also bringing in master's students from the Land Use Policy Department to also assist.
Okay, perfect.
Yep, so we've only had one meeting, so far, or two meetings, sorry.
What is your approach with the committee?
Thus far, we have began to review all of the plans that have been recently done, or the most recent of any plan that is relevant. And then we are also we've been putting together GIS maps of, especially blowing up the maps that were already in the old plan to kind of revisit what was planned, what didn't happen, and what has been moving forward, because we wouldn't totally want to erase what we already had planned. So we're kind of doing all this review first. And then we also are looking at hiring a consulting firm to organize and push it forward.
And what's key about the, looking at the various plans, we actually have it in a centralized location. So all the plans of the city recreational plan, master plan, the whole 9 yards are in a centralized location. One of the other key items that's come out of the master plan committee is looking at population growth and projecting for 2030, especially since this is a year of the census, and where the city currently resides as it relates to population.
Is the goal at some point then that the committee work would come to us, the planning commission, and then we at that point are involved?
No.
Yes, so, well, at one point, I guess it is up to you how much, how often you would like them to us to come before and get your involvement. What we were thinking is we would kind of get the ball rolling with hiring this planning consultant, and then we would have city meetings. So it would be a couple different meetings that involve the planning commission and the council.
Right.
And other groups would be separate just from the public meetings, because obviously there's a little bit of a different, that's a different type of arrangement, I would say.
The overall timetable is what?
We have a resolution out there, we have a resolution out there to have a master plan in place by the end of December.
Okay.
But that is probably not going to be when it's going to happen.
Ambitious.
Right, it's kind
That's
of
very-
ambitious. Another thing to point out is that we've already got the approval to move forward with actually hiring an urban planner. So that is also in the works to bring them in and get them a part of this committee as well.
It seems to me it'd be good to have input to this committee at any major stage of the planning. Anytime there's, if you get your urban planner makes recommendations, that'd be a good time. So that we can decide if we think that belongs as part of it.
Agreed.
I think that our whole intent is to start laying out the groundwork, look at where the last master plan left us, what objectives we have achieved, form this committee so that we could come back to you and say, okay, this is where we are, who we've hired, who we're working with, where our plans lie at, not just the master plan, but other plans that are listed within the master plan. So like the recreational plan, form-based zoning being one of the newer items that's going to be inclusive. I think that Cassie and we talked about not just looking at it as like a land use policy document where you're just talking about the land, but actually what's happening in Saginaw and how not just the riverfront, but the whole community. Looking at working with MISTA to do a housing study so that we know what kind of housing stock that we're dealing with. I mean, it's going to be a huge plan to kind of revamp, but also doing things that we weren't able to do because of the length of time it took for us to even get to replace a plan in 2011 and then going forward. Because when's the last time it was done before 2011? It was some time. So I think there's a lot that got missed in our development, but there's a lot to do. And so bringing in Eric Scorsoni and the Land Use Policy Department and a committee, bringing it before you and getting your direction will help us revamp it. So that's why I'm saying December is ambitious. Getting the right people involved is going to be paramount.
And I will say from the comments that I got, from Bob and Jim Doan, you guys were right on target of everything that we've been talking about in our meetings too. So talking about the riverfront mixed use, so how all of that fits in with, the plan, considering, including parks and recs and the transportation and different types of plans in there to make it more inclusive. The gateways, we've talked a lot about gateways, and you guys talked about housing too. We've talked a lot about housing, where we need to focus our housing efforts, because that's obviously something that Saginaw has kind of struggled with. And then revisiting the checklist, of
Right,
course.
and the green zone was a big.
And the green
topic
zone,
of
yeah, nobody
conversation.
mentioned the green zone in your comments, but yeah, the green zone was one of our very first, how are we going to deal with this? Because it kind of was left really ambiguous in the last plan.
It should be addressed, but are there plans to address the question of infrastructure? Not maintaining it, but where and what infrastructure we should have?
I think that, I'm going to speak for myself, but I think that's going to come with time, and I think it's going to be a larger conversation with the planning commission and the group.
I think it has to be part of it, because things like burying cables, things like, or wires, whatever, things like the railroad system that we have in town should not be there, quite frankly. It doesn't belong in the middle of a residential and hospital zone. Those kinds of things, bridges, all of those need to be part of this, I think.
Right?
Yeah.
I think one thing that we had mentioned is the continual conversation of the unfunded mandate on lead and copper.
Yep,
Oh, yeah.
we mentioned that.
So,
Yeah,
Seawalls on the, seawalls were brought up. There's a lot of infrastructure.
and I know when we applied for the Bloomberg's grant several years back, decommissioning service lines, infrastructure, below ground infrastructure was a topic of conversation.
Even
which,
roads.
again, we'll be bringing up again.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, that's a big element to me. Okay.
All right. We are at public comment. I see no public.
What do you mean, we're all But I don't have a comment either.
I did have one thing that I wanted to bring before this commission. I know,
A good time to do that.
yes, previously when Mr. Faust was here, the conversation and topic of medical marijuana was brought up. I think we really need to look at that. So is there anything, Cassie, like some ordinances that we can start looking at as far as, we kind of have an idea somewhat of what other communities are doing, but if we have some who have agreed to do that, I think we should look at how they're doing it, because there's so many different components to it, and I want to make sure that we do our due diligence, with planning.
I don't have anything with me.
No,
but
I'm
I
sure-
will
I'm sure.
research it. Yeah.
Yes, if you could research it and bring us back some documents, something that we can kind of look at and really work toward a common goal here.
You may need to talk to Amy Lusk.
Right.
About, she may have input on some of the locations that would address it.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So you're only wanting to look at medical marijuana and not
I think we need to look at both.
recreational?
Yeah, I think we can look at both. I think that last night's decision at council was for recreational, so there's time. But I think we need to start looking at the other component, the medical side, because that may come up sooner than the recreational.
I think, I'm not sure if anybody else remember this, but I remember it coming before the medical marijuana became before the planning commission before.
is a discussion, I think, wasn't it just a discussion that
It
Mike
was just a
Faust
discussion we
raised?
had with Faust.
And we
Kind
do need to further educate and update ourselves
Right.
on the whole thing.
We now have rules, the emergency rules, but it does provide for 4 new types of facilities, where the original statute, original language of the referendum only had 4. So now, well, had 4 plus some subcategories. So now we have at least 8 major categories of facilities, plus some subcategories.
And I couldn't even know what one
But
of them are.
that's why.
That's why we need to.
From a planning point of view, I mean, if we permanently opt out, it is not an issue, but of course, there's even the referendum possibility by the citizens to have facilities, which means at some point it could happen no matter what. If we do as a council opt in, then we want to be ready for that. And the instructions to staff by council last night was to start figuring out some of this stuff.
For recreational
For
facilities.
recreation.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Did I understand that what the council did last night was approve a proposal to direct the staff to begin preparing the paperwork, I guess, for opting out with
Opting
a
out.
sunset
with
of
the
12 months?
sunset, 12-month sunset, yes.
For recreational.
For recreational. And where the city is right now on medical is
Neutral.
nowhere, right?
No, there's been no decision to opt in. You have, that's the difference in the two. Medical, you have to opt in.
Oh.
Recreation, you have to opt out. And it was very deliberate when they did the recreational language of the referendum, so that if you didn't do anything, you got it. As opposed to with the medical, you could only opt in. If you didn't opt in, you didn't get it. So when they did the recreational referendum, they were very slick about putting that in that way, so that you had to physically, as a council or a community, opt out. So in any event, that's where we are, but we need to be looking at, if we want facilities, if the council ever determines, either way, recreational marijuana or medical, where and how we want to deal with the facilities issue. Because that's all we're dealing with. With the medical, or marijuana is legal in the state, and not federally, but in the state it's legal, and having it in your home is legal. But facilities are up to the state to license and up to us to address issues of zoning, planning, and so forth. So I do agree, we should be figuring out some things, because council's gonna want some answers down the road.
So we will have some things to learn about all of that.
What is the relationship in that respect between this body and the zoning commission?
It's a good question, I think. The zoning actually approves the zoning requirements. We do a little different, like here we gave an exception essentially. We may want to look into
Well,
exactly,
that's one of the questions.
yeah, exactly what the difference is.
Yeah.
I would think all 3 would have to approve it.
You may well be right. I know zoning board has to approve any locations for facilities. And probably we would have to, or at least make recommendations.
And that's, you know, my concern is that I think council made their decision last night as it pertains to, you know, recreational facilities with that sunset 1-year provision. But that doesn't mean that it won't be brought back up, especially when it comes to the medical part. So I think, yeah, we just have to start continuing those conversations and really looking at what we want to give as a recommendation to the council.
One of the things we'll have to be careful of is whichever way it goes, it requires ordinance, first of all, an ordinance. And then it requires, if we allow it, it should require ordinances regarding zoning, environmental and similar things. So those will all be worked on with the legal staff, but it's appropriate, I think, to be talking with the legal staff about our thoughts as well. Absolutely.
For, with recreational, people can apply to, if you allowed it. People could apply to the city, for example, for a license.
Not exactly.
facility?
It's the state that you apply for,
Okay.
for a license.
All right.
We give business licenses, but we don't give medical.
Business
licenses.
license.
We don't give recreational marijuana licenses. That is the
You
state.
get a business license.
We would have to deal, because we still have the business license requirements. And we have our zoning requirements, so those all would have to be dealt with.
So if you had 100 people who applied for one of these business licenses, is that something that this body would take into consideration when we make
That's where
any
it
kind
gets,
of body recommendations to the council?
that's where it gets complicated, because we have to, in the city, in its discretion, has to figure out a way to choose the best candidates. And that's, that language is really vague. That's the basic.
Unless you
language.
have, correct me if I'm wrong, unless you have unlimited.
Unlimited, you could, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Theoretically, you could allow unlimited, but, it'd be up to us, to make, probably make a recommendation to council whether we should have limits or none. I would think that'd be, as a planning commission, and then the zoning commission would choose, or the zoning board would choose where those kinds of facilities would be, those 8 different kinds of facilities.
Another example of how much we have to learn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are there any other items to come before this meeting? If not, we are adjourned.